Hey guys, it's Amber Viola, host of Politics but Make It Fashion. Come interview with me. Welcome back, guys. And this week I have a chance to interview Julie and Kim, and they are both two powerhouse women that I have had the pleasure of either working adjacent with or just being around. Julie, I met you, I think, when I first kind of was starting off in Scranton once I got out the Navy and stuff. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for being here on my podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So we are talking today about Scranton Stories. And so I guess first I would like you guys to just kind of like introduce yourselves, and then we'll start talking about the Scranton Stories.
Cool. Okay, I will start off and then I'll pass things over to Kim. So I'm Julie Schumacher-Cohen. I serve as Assistant Vice President for Community Engagement and Government Affairs at the University of Scranton. But what I'll be talking about today is part of my work there, which is to direct a project called Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story. We won a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which was really a big honor for the Scranton area because those are really competitive grants.
Yeah.
This is a community-wide project. Certainly the university helped to lead it in different ways, but I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about the many partners that have been a part of this project. So I do lots of different work in the community, but of course, this has been a real focus of my work over the last couple of years.
And I'm Kimberly Crafton. I am the lead and founder of Crafton Cultural Management. I work with community groups for the last probably 25 to 30 years to help identify and preserve their legacies, their stories. And that really means digging into the fiber of what it means to be alive, to be connected to a geography, to be connected to the people around you, as far as your heritage, your culture, and even the way you express yourself in your arts and writing and all of those kinds of ways that we express ourselves, both as humans and through our communities. So it's a real joy to be working with Julie and with the university on this as a coordinator for the oral histories portion of this much larger project.
Yeah. So how did this kind of like come about? What the idea of doing this Scranton Stories?
Yeah, so I'll step back a little bit into like the whole project, which is so we're going to talk specifically about the oral history, the Scranton Stories piece, which is the culmination of the 2-year project. But I'll just say briefly about the whole project, the Scranton Story, Our Nation's Story project, which is really about looking at our local community, the stories of Scranton, and how they help us think about the identity, the history, the ideas of belonging, community, and democracy for the larger nation. And so really, when we were first getting together and writing the grant, we wanted to think about telling a more holistic Scranton story. We feel that there are many wonderful celebrated stories of Scranton, and that is reflected in the project. We also wanted to bring stories to the fore that we felt had not been focused on as much, including the Black history and story of Scranton, stories of Scranton, because there's always multiple stories. Celebrating the immigrant story of Scranton from coming from the coal mining and industrial past with European immigrants coming here, but also thinking about more recent immigrant and refugee communities. And so how does that add to the story? How do we bring that story to fruition to today, to Latino, Latinx immigrants coming here and refugees coming here from all over the world, and also thinking about the indigenous history and heritage of Scranton. So that's kind of we had many programs over the last 2 years focusing on various themes, including celebrating the industrial history and heritage of Scranton, but then also bringing in some of these stories that have been not as focused on perhaps, and having that all kind of come together.
That's really cool. I love that. I love this area so much, and there's so much history here, and so many things that I'm always learning all the time about it, about different people that was here. I was with Glennis last night, and we gave away a Louise Tanner Brown Award, and I was like, I don't even know who this person is. And they were so pivotal in the founding of like the first Scranton NAACP and stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is just one story that I don't know and that many people don't know. So then like, how do you go about kind of doing like an oral history with that?
That gets really interesting because, we are certainly not the first group to try to tell, Scranton stories. Since Scranton has existed, we love telling our stories and we've been very good at it. And many stories have been recorded, many stories have been presented, kind of like you said, dig back into the history to find these beautiful nuggets and try to bring those forward. So one of the things we were very cognizant of is we're certainly not the first people to tell a Scranton story, and we certainly won't be the last. So we're trying to be very cognizant of that, as we are saying that we are a small, these 25 kind of stories that we end up as what we're spotlighting as the end of the oral history project is really just a piece of the mosaic of the larger community of Scranton that is continually telling its stories. But to identify and to try to get at those 25 stories, we wanted it to be an inclusive process. Instead of just kind of handpicking 25 people, which becomes a very exclusive process, we began 2 years ago with going out into the community to all of these different community festivals and setting up what we called the Scranton Stories booth, where we just kind of put up this big thing and said, hey, we just want to hear from you. Whoever you are, whatever your story is, what does Scranton mean to you? What role do you think we still have as Scrantonians in informing the future of our nation? What's happening in Scranton that could be used as a model for what our nation could strive for, and what challenges are we having that we recognize that the nation is also struggling? So we were trying to get these conversations rolling. But again, always that final aim was to come out with almost like a video snapshot of who we are, a kind of a small cross-reference of who we are as Scrantonians at this moment in time, so that for posterity, for the humanities purposes, people can look back and see, a nice representation of who we were at this point in time. So that's kind of what we set about to do. We reached out to not only our partners in the project, but to a great number of community members. So it was kind of people were recommending people that we should talk to get who should we see, and who would be good to try to grab the breadth of our story together.
I remember you guys being at different events and things and seeing the booth and stuff, and people were very interested in it and very like, oh, well, what is this? So I'm really excited to see like the final thing to be put together. But I also love that you guys were so involved in so many, I don't want to say like random festivals, but like so many, even the smaller ones that kind of don't get a lot of publicity and stuff, and seeing you guys there and everything. And I thought that was very cool to make sure you get a piece of that, because Scranton has so many different, like you have the Bhutanese, things, and you have like Latino festivals, and obviously we have the Italian one, and different things. And it's just so cool to see some of these little pieces of Scranton. And we do have a big immigrant history as well, and a lot of people don't know that there's immigrants here, and stuff. So I think it's really important to kind of get that out there. So as you guys were kind of gathering this information from people, was there anything that shocked you or like surprised you in gathering the information?
Yeah, how many tissues we would go through. There were a lot of tears. We had tissue boxes at every interview.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we I think, as you know, Amber, from interviewing, you're always grateful for people opening up to you as an interviewer. And I want to also shout out that Glynis Johns was a part of the recruitment and the interviews and the editing for the stories of the African American interviewees, and Alejandra Marroquin, who works at the Geisinger Commonwealth Medical College and has been part of various immigrant inclusion efforts. She was part of the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx interviews. So we didn't even those interviews, we didn't do only myself and Kim. It was a real group effort. But yeah, we heard hard stories of Scranton, and that was part of the purpose, was not to give a kind of, there can be a place for sort of cheerleader boosterism, hey, we love Scranton. And I think actually everybody that we interview does love Scranton in all of its sort of imperfections and all of the challenges that it has. But they were very honest too about really hard times that they faced, whether it's experiences of poverty, certainly experiences of racism and discrimination, homophobia, lack of acceptance of LGBTQ communities. That came up in a number of the interviews. So yeah, there's a lot of different themes of hardship, really. And ways, and also ways that people found community, which I think is so important, and is also obviously reflects but again, both our local story here, but also thinking about how do we, because the larger theme that the NEH, the National Endowment for the Humanities, was funding and is continuing to do that, is that we're coming up to the 250th anniversary of the United States. And so this idea of how do we still form a more perfect union, this very big question. But we kind of posed that throughout the project. And so people were, they were talking honestly about, yes, this is what we need to do in Scranton, and this is what we also need to do in the larger nation. And sometimes they were the same thing, and sometimes they were, slightly different. But I think if we can make this community one where people feel that they belong and that they can participate, then hopefully that helps the broader project.
Right. And we're coming up to the election too. And they, Scranton is always such a focal point of, and Pennsylvania kind of as a whole, of a snapshot of the nation. And I think it is a really good view of what kind of culturally different things are like. And I think it could help in general, just seeing how we do things, how we all function, and how we all thrive together, to kind of show the world. I mean, when I came back here, it was such a positive experience, and I wasn't expecting it to be, not that I thought it was going to be negative or anything. I just didn't really know what to expect. And I would have never thought that I would have this much community just, 5-6 years from living in the city here. So there's some really great things, and there are some really hard things. And I think having those hard conversations is really important, because how do we change it? How do we make it better if we don't know about it? And there's so many people here that don't realize how much poverty is here, how many people are living in poverty, that people can't afford to go to schools here because they can't, it costs more than their income. And I think that's something that needs to be understood, and different aspects of that and stuff. So I love that. I love history, so I'm very excited about all of this.
I do too. I have an unhealthy excitement about history myself. But I think in those hard stories, what you asked, what surprised us, I think I was really touched and surprised by the grace of the whole thing. So grace came in two ways. It came, first of all, by being vulnerable enough to share your story.
Yeah.
And it also came in how you chose to tell your hard stories. And there was an awful lot of grace extended in every direction. So we really felt blessed by that in strong ways. But we were also excited when people chose to just talk about their hopes for the future of Scranton. So here's what's hard, but here's what I'm really hoping for. So that exact spirit that you're talking about was throughout pretty much every interview.
Wow, that's really great. I love
that. And if I can give people a little teaser, because we have, it's starting to trickle out some of who some of the interviewees are, and they will be revealed on Friday at the event that we're and then online. But one of our interviewees is Norma Jeffries, and I think you know her
Miss
well.
Norma!
And one of the quotes that she has that I think helps to just bring a really neat theme is that she talks about, when I'm disappointed by things in Scranton, I think about what can I do? What can I do? And again, those who know her know that she's such a wonderfully civically involved person. But again, I think a lot of the interviews pick up on that theme of like, what are these things that I've gone through, that I've come through, but also what can whether I'm going to give back to a new community or give back to the city in a different way, or really help continue working on that issue because I've been able to overcome over here. We heard from Bhutanese, we heard from two of our refugee sets of interviews, and I won't go into a whole tangent on it, but just that one of the surprises that we had was that independently, a woman who is a Congolese refugee and a gentleman who is a Bhutanese refugee both reflected on the heartbreak of seeing unhoused individuals in Scranton. So people who are homeless and seeing themselves as refugees in that experience and being so surprised that a country that's as wealthy as the United States.
Yeah.
And like literally just like they just can't believe it. They feel so grateful to be here and they're taking advantage of every opportunity. But they really, and they've helped even, they've even reached out and had events for these populations. So that was just an amazing, like the fact that it came up in both of these interviews, totally separate,
That's crazy. And I know when I first came back, I was actually surprised by the homeless population seemed smaller, which I know it is now when I came back. So I was very shocked to see how well things were progressing. And even though they were maybe moving slow for the people that were here, because I was gone for, like 10 years. But just being able to see the progress of that, there's still issues and stuff. But I mean, I've worked with people here who have gone into the woods, into the mountains to help count the homeless population and give them food and like supplies and meeting them where they're at, which I found to be so inspirational. It's like this person's out here right now and what they need is a tarp. Like that's what we can do. And that's, the different things that they need. And Miss Norma is such an inspiration to me. I want to be her so bad when I grow up. Like the dedication that she has to the city and different things and stuff. I mean, it's just the energy that she has. I don't know where she gets it from, but, and that just shows there's so many people here who are just doing their part to really help and support and are just so uplifting. And watching her, and I was with her last night at the NAACP Freedom Fund banquet that we had, and just being around her, she's just so kind and helpful and loves people. And to me, that is Scranton. That's what I feel like it is here for the most part, is like there's such this big loving community, and even the racism here. Like I was telling somebody about how like when I went to the Navy and I experienced overt racism for the first time, and they're like, don't you live like, and I said, yes, I do. And I was very surprised that how not as racist it is here as other places. There's still racism. There's still definitely issues. But it always surprises my other friends and family when I talk about Scranton or even where I grew up in Goldsboro up the mountain, how non-racism, because I'll talk about things and they're so surprised. And I'm like, it's such, I don't know how to explain what it is here, but people are just nice.
That could be our, on the sign coming into Scranton, it could be Scranton, not as racist.
Not as racist.
Well, and that's funny because, we interviewed a lot of folks who are the descendants of white European immigrants, Italian, Irish, Polish, Welsh, lots of the different communities that we know and love that are part of the Scranton community. But one thing that also was a little bit of a theme was people talking about it has become more diverse of a city. Absolutely. Like that change, and that, and people who even had grown up here and then went away maybe for college and came back and went to more diverse areas and were like, wow, look at what I missed by not having all these different community groups and not being able to absorb that like as kids per se in their childhood, but now embracing that and in the community now and being able. So I do think that Scranton's one of those places where people can certainly say the wrong thing and be insulting and be racist at times, but I think there are also a lot of people who desire to learn, to expand their horizons, to celebrate those new cultures. And hopefully we hope that this project will help people to do that by being able to showcase all these different stories.
I think one of the ways that you help is by showing that all of these things they're simply a human timeline. So to immigrate into a new area, there's a timeline. There's when you're first arriving, there's where you're looking for safety. There's where you have your economic insecurity, your language barriers, then you get your first job, then you get, so it is always a progression. And the value of looking at so many stories, some of whom are more recent immigrants to people who have been here for a few generations now, or even since the 1800s, it's the same process. We all have to go through that same process, but you see it, and you just see it that we're all in that same process, but just at different points on that timeline. And that came up too in the with people that are facing economic insecurity. That's also a timeline. How do you begin to develop security? How do you begin to develop safety around you so that, as one of the folks put it, you can begin to build a life worth living?
Oh, yeah.
Not just to make a life, but to have a life worth living.
Yeah.
And it's like stuff like that makes you cry.
Oh, I would have been crying the whole time, guys.
Well, we do recommend some tissues if for those who are going to watch a bunch, some of the different, they're about 8 to 10 minutes. So they're not, they're not too long, but they are cut and edited from the longer, about anywhere from like 45 minutes to an hour.
How did you go about trying to kind of like get all of this together? cohesively, and then like, okay, we're gonna put on an event to kind of showcase that? How were you guys able to first, I guess, narrow it down?
You want me to jump in on that one?
Sure, you can jump in. Yeah.
So the beauty of it is how organic it was. The idea was, oh, okay, let's do the interviews and then we'll edit them down. But what you began to see was that even in a 1 hour interview, there's a thread of conversation that you can find and you can follow, and you can kind of cut away, like Michelangelo talks about the sculpture is under, not Michelangelo, but sculptors talk about the sculpture is underneath the marble, and you just have to like take away the parts until you get the thing that wants to be said. So we were trying to get at that, and in that process of doing that, we just, you really feel what's urgent that needs to come out, and what can be saved for a more extended version, which we hope at some point to maybe also be able to make a little more public as a slightly extended version for people that you really want to hear more about their story. But at the same time, as an kind of an honor to each of the participants, we wanted to take a photograph of them in a location in Scranton that had deep personal meaning to them as a gift and a thank you. And as our photographer began working with each person and hearing why they selected the location for their photograph, we realized that that was also a documentation of place, how important place is to people, and what different places in Scranton meant to each one of them. And I'll let Julie take it from there as to how that continued to unfold.
Yeah, so we'll do another shout out because Byron Maldonado, who's a native of Guatemala and a wonderful photographer and is a University of Scranton photographer, we partnered with him to do these on location photos. And so as Kim said, as he was bringing those back, he was getting those stories and he was sharing with us the reason why people chose them, and they just became their own little piece of the project. So that's what the event this Friday visually will be, because it's hard to put out 25 interviews. Where does somebody start? Like, oh my God, so this way you see this visual representation. You can decide which ones are of most interest to you, and then and what you'll see when if people decide to come to the Hope Horn Gallery either this Friday or over the next 2 weeks when it's up, is a photo of each interviewee. Sometimes they're together, and if there's a group, if it was an interview with 2 people, sometimes they're together or sometimes they're separate. It's going to say why the location that they're at, why they chose that location, so that meaning that it had for them, and then excerpts from the interview and a QR code that takes you to the interview on YouTube. Nice. So hopefully we give people really like that kind of flavor of what the person was trying to share, and give you like kind of a teaser. We'll also have a room on Friday night where they'll be playing kind of like in a loop too. So people can also listen to some of the interviews, and we'll have a trailer where you'll get, again, like kind of a teaser of the 20. So it's 25 video interviews, but it's 33 local residents altogether, because a couple of them were really neat things that happened where we decided to interview like a father and a daughter, or 2 sisters, a mother and a daughter, because their stories intertwined, but they were generationally different. Just in terms sometimes about immigration, like somebody who was an undocumented immigrant, for instance, who came across the southern border, but then the daughter or the sister were born in the United States, and then the differences of that journey and those struggles, and so really, that's an example of one that was a duo. So, but yeah, great big shout out to Byron. He's a wonderful photographer, so people will be in for a treat for the visual aspect, which was not something we've planned from the beginning.
Right. So can you just give the details about what's going on for this Friday so people know where to go?
Yes. So October 27th is the premiere of Scranton Stories, which is these oral history interviews and portrait photographs. So from 5 to 6 p.m., you can come to Brennan Hall at the University of Scranton for a panel discussion with kind of the team of folks, again, who helped to put this together. So it'll be myself, Julie Schumacher-Cohen, Kimberly Crafton, Glynis Johns of the Black Scranton Project, Alejandra Mariquin, who helped with the Hispanic and Latinx interviews, Byron Maldonado, photographer, and Marianne Savakinas from the Lackawanna Historical Society. Many of the interviews have wonderful historic photos of Scranton that help to tell the person's story. And of course, they've also been a big partner throughout the project. So that's 5 to 6 p.m. And then from 6 to 8 p.m., we move to Hyland Hall to the Hope Horn Gallery, where we'll have this exhibit, as I mentioned, with the visual and the interview aspects, and there'll be food. You always have to have food.
Great.
And then
I really can't wait. So what is the next step after this? So after this exhibit and everything, you know, what are you guys' next step with all this information?
You can jump in there, Kim, if you want. I think
Yeah,
a big nap.
We're both gonna have a sleep in, you know, like it's just like sleep past 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. No, I think the idea with all of this is both to preserve the full edited, you know, the full unedited version of each of these videos, again, for humanities purposes at the library at the university. So that would be really, really important that those are preserved. And it's one of the main reasons that people were excited to do that. They felt that they were really contributing something to future generations that was important to preserve. So the Weinberg Memorial Library will house those unedited interviews. We invite people from different organizations, school groups, etc., to contact the Hope Horn Gallery to try to coordinate a visit to the, you know, by different groups. If you would like to see it during, you know, between October 27th and November 17th, during gallery hours, they would be delighted to have you there. And if you need to have someone there to kind of give a talk, get in touch with us, and we can see what we can arrange to help with that. And then I think after that, Julie's done some work with different school groups and things like that. The hope is that it would be a resource for helping schools and other organizations to continue conversations like this. There's no reason that we are the first, you know, that we would be the only way that people could continue asking these kinds of questions about, you know, what does your experience in a place mean to you? What are your hopes for that area, and what are your hopes for our country, and how do we continue to be what our interviewees really pointed out, is that the job is ours to create a more perfect union. Yeah. So these conversations continuing is really the hope of the whole project.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for joining me. Julie, did you have anything else that you wanted to add here?
I think just building on Kim's point, absolutely. We want to continue the conversation. We'll probably will produce something of a booklet or some kind of a resource that you know, again, like school groups, certainly for the local higher education, it's a great opportunity for professors to take into the classroom. Like, you can group there's different themes that run across interviews, so they can absolutely be used as an educational resource. But we wanted to expand, you know, how we think about ourselves as Scrantonians and how we think about ourselves as the nation. And I think that's going to be an ever continuing and ongoing story. But also, we have these 2 years before we celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States. And we know that we have so much more to do to make this a country that is truly a just, pluralistic democracy. And so we hope that this project will help us do our part here in Scranton.
Oh, that's so crazy. I'm excited for that coming up too. We're so young, you know, as a country. It's really crazy. So I think, like, not that we're too hard on ourselves, because we have a lot of stuff we need to do, but we're still very young in it. And a lot of these other places have been doing this for thousands of years, you know. So the 250 coming up is a big deal, but it just shows how, you know, we're still babies when it comes to countries and different things, and our history and stuff, because we're not that old, even though we think as Americans we're, you know, the beginning and the end. But
that's what's interesting is, as a country we're not that old, but as a democracy, it's not often that a democracy lasts as long as this one has. So we are pluralistic in that way. So other countries are excited by watching, you know, the age of our democracy. That gives them hope.
Yeah, no, definitely it does. This was really great, ladies, and I'm very, very excited to go and be there on Friday and see the exhibits and stuff, and to bring my little mini-me with me, of course. So thank you so much. And where can they find you guys online if anybody wanted to reach out?
Yeah, so the whole project is easy to find. It's www.scranton.edu/Scranton Story. And then I think I'm not that great about being on like X and, but I'm Julie Schumacher Cohen, J Schumacher Cohen. You can reach out at julie.cohen@scranton.edu. We are very open and wanting to hear feedback, obviously, as the project emerges and we share the stories. So really want it to be a conversation. So absolutely would love to hear from folks. And there's still ways that people can share their story. There is a submission form on the website that people can still share their own story. So we want to continue to take in more stories, although we're going to take a breath. We're going to take a breath after this.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Amber, for having us on today. Really wonderful to chat with you.
Kim, where could they find you, or would this direct them to the website as well?
Yep, you can go to the website for Scranton Stories, or you can find me directly at craftoncultural.com. So that's CRAFTON cultural.com. And then I think too, one of the things that, regarding trying to make sure that people are able to access not only these, but other wonderful Scranton stories. One of the aims of the project is also to make public a kind of a clearinghouse of information about projects that have happened in the past. Really, really important things that are, both conversations about Scranton stories that have happened in the past and that are currently ongoing. So we would also love to hear about from people about projects that they know, podcasts that they know that we might not have on that resource list when that gets published as well. So
that would be really great to have all that all in one place. There's definitely
so much that so much good work that has already happened and that is currently happening. So we want to make sure that people can access it directly instead of having to do all the searching.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited for that list to come out too. That would make it easier for me. Well, thank you so much, ladies. And thank you guys for joining me on another episode of Politics But Make It Fashion. You can find us on Instagram at Politics But Make It Fashion 1, on Facebook at Politics But Make It Fashion, and on TikTok at Politics But Make It Fashion. And we will chat soon. Okay.